What's going on, everybody? So we return to Winter River as Beetlejuice has come back to the big screen by Tim Burton as a follow-up to his 1988 classic. Now, Burton is a divisive director. Some people really love his work, some people really hate it. I'm pretty neutral when it comes to his filmography, but that being said, I'm a huge fan of the original. So I was really looking forward to this movie, and while it took a bit to get going, I really enjoyed the movie. It was all mayhem and wackiness by the end of it, and overall I think it delivered a good sequel. And to no one's surprise, Michael Keaton delivered a fantastic performance. He was still silly and goofy, but he brought more texture to the character this time around. And listen, by all accounts, it doesn't make sense, but it really shouldn't. The original just kind of threw us into this immersive and strange world and said, yeah, this dude is gonna be the guy to look out for, with really no background outside of him doing some like freelance exorcisms. And really, the movie never made it feel like we needed to know much more than that. It was really self-explanatory by that point. To be honest, this movie was somehow able to give more depth to this character without really changing the guy. He's still funny and demented, but with a bit more color, if you know what I mean. And every moment Keaton is on screen, it's just natural and fun, and all, by the way, with having similar to maybe a little bit more screen time than he had in the original. Michael Keaton has said how before he didn't want to overdo this character's screen time and wanted him to show up in roughly the same amount of time. So the fact he was able to convey this much more was just a merit to his acting. And as a whole, it's endearing to know that most of the original cast only wanted to come back if essentially most of the same faces returned. And as a fan, parting ways with Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin was sad. But their time in this story is over, their arc is over. We've seen how misused legacy characters who clearly have overstayed their welcome goes. So I was okay with their departure. And anything that Lydia would have needed to understand as an adult, she would have learned by now, since dealing with fraught relationships isn't new to her. You'd think during the time skip Lydia would have learned anything she would have needed to from the Maitlands, and Astrid's basically all grown up by this point, so really, extra guidance would have just felt tedious. Stylistically, it's faithful to the original. Obviously, Burton has said how he wanted to maintain the use of practical and stop-motion effects at a maximum level, and it does feel like an actual sequel to the original movie. The characters all felt like at this point in time, this in fact is how they would be. Catherine O'Hara and Winona Ryder, I mean, they really slipped right back into character, and this movie is nothing else if not a testament to their acting skills and status as A-list actors. And without a doubt, I'd say the standouts for sure were Catherine O'Hara and Michael Keaton. They were incredible and both so funny, to the point that while this may be true for most of the returning actors, it's especially true for them that you could tell they love these roles. I'll also say Jenna Ortega did a great job. Personally, she has been falling into the Anya Taylor-Joy thing, where she's become too oversaturated and shows up on literally every other project. And that's not to say that I don't love Anya Taylor-Joy. The Witch is one of my favorite movies of all time, and she's amazing in that movie. And even though everybody knows her for her role as Wednesday, this proves this isn't the extent of her acting ability. Hell, I mean, I knew that from her time of being a spunky, precocious teen in season 2 of You. She's not just this gothic, morbid girl that just dresses in black all the time. But her acting is really highlighted when she and Jeremy get to kind of know each other a little bit more, or when she's bickering with her family, and even when she confronts Rory. She's magnetic and always gives a strong performance. So you bring back the already loved cast from the original, bring in Jenna Ortega, and throw in some Willem Dafoe who literally doesn't know how to put in a bad performance, cause while being a lousy cop, he really played into the campy tone, and you could tell he was having a lot of fun with it. And damn, that's a stacked roster, and certainly gonna be a good time for sure. And just like in the original, the best and most creative parts were in the afterlife, where Burton really got to showcase a plethora of really cool imagery and ghouls. The claymation scene for one of the deaths was gorgeous. And funny enough, this title is known for its practical use, and the little bit of CGI that they used here actually just felt so awkward and strange, so I'm glad that it was actually kept to a minimum. The problem with this movie is that it tries to juggle too much, and some of the storylines just felt a bit messy and undercooked, if you will. The original had multiple things going on, but it was able to mesh the different plot threads together in a way that didn't feel forced and all moved forward in a way that still keeps you invested. Like, this movie at times felt like things just happen and nothing comes out of it. The inconsistency of the rules of ghosts are harmful because they lessen the threat of Beetlejuice, who is supposed to be this monster that Lydia is terrified of. You could quite literally walk away from him and done, problem solved. Lydia just shouting home 3 times completely disarmed the entirety of Keaton's character. In general, this series isn't meant to be looked at as a series with complex layers and themes, but to be honest, with how many storylines they had going on at the same time, it all just ended up being so anticlimactic. And a bit of a frustrating point is that if they would have just settled for a few storylines, it would have been so much more compelling. But with the first half antics, it just felt like a fever dream. How the origin of Astrid's dad would have made for such a strong emotional beat, but they fluffed it and instead just rushed through it. On top of the fact that we never even get an explanation for why they couldn't see him, or what makes him the one exception to the gift. And I don't know if I'm alone in this, but Astrid starts off as such a strong, clever girl, but the moment she meets Jeremy, I swear it feels like she drops like half her IQ points. She becomes gullible and oblivious, like the Astrid that we're introduced to would have never read some random gibberish that a stranger that you just met would have told you to do so, just because he told you that he can help you find your dad. How do you know he can do that? Like, the writing for her character was just very bizarre. Even the train scene, she's kind of just standing there in like a catatonic state, and Lydia just kind of walks in and pulls her right out, even though she's not like shackled down or anything. I also felt the same way about Dolores' massacre, which was supposed to lead to a confrontation with Keaton, but I just feel like it didn't land the way it should have. By far, my favorite scene though was her reassembling herself. It was just so sick. But you have this like badass Terminator character that kills everything in her path and comes to like a screeching halt. Her exit was insulting and ironically deflating because you felt so unsatisfied with her story. For all her awesome aura and presence, which Monica Bellucci really did an amazing job of just being an absolute menace, even the Mario Bava-esque flashback was a lot of fun, but realistically you could remove her entirely from the movie and nothing would have changed, and that's how you know a character is truly dispensable, if the removal of a character creates zero ripples in the story. The lack of focus really harmed the flow of the movie. Like, Catherine O'Hara and Winona Ryder definitely had comedic moments that were funny, but they got overshadowed by the erratic nature of the movie that it almost made it lose its charm. The first movie showed us an eccentric group of characters that felt natural, so as an audience, you can really enjoy them. And this world isn't a stranger to an eccentric nature, but too many directions made it feel off-putting, especially in the first half. Oh man, in that same vein, Rory, played by Justin Theroux, was insufferable. The original film was able to make the odd, eccentric characters likable, cause like with most movies, once you understand, oh, this character is meant to be hated or disliked, it's charming and you can kinda like and appreciate it if done correctly. I don't know what it was, but every time Rory opened his mouth, I was so excited to move on to the next scene where he didn't have to take up any more screen time. It's why I loved when Astrid was trying to put him in his place for being the charlatan that he is during the funeral. Despite the fact that these are still the same characters from the original movie, the pacing of the movie is very inconsistent. You have to get through the first 30 minutes to be able to start to get invested into the story. But once you get to the second half, it really brings all the energy and electric fun that you'd expect, so the lack of focus doesn't feel so blatantly obvious, but with the first half being so much slower, with not much eye candy, you feel it much more and just wonder when the good stuff is gonna happen. This is a great example of how great acting and great visuals can be bogged down by a weak script, and also how important a script can be for a movie. I'm glad that the story is not a copy and paste of the original, by the way. It's entirely its own thing, and in general it's a bizarre film and it knows and leans into that, and because of that it's a good watch regardless of if the story unthreads at times. Bonus points though for the decision on making the Halloween season the vibe and aesthetic of the town in general. It just felt so cozy. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and I wonder what they'll name the third movie in this series. Probably Beetlejuice Beetlejuice